This might sound like a digression, but after finding this sub recently, I felt like I could finally share something that my family and I went through a few years ago. I still get a shiver from it. I've spent my entire childhood in Oregon hunting, camping, and solo trekking, and I always felt at ease in the woods. I hold nature with the highest regard. My wife, kid, and 2 German shepherds went camping in Oregon a few years ago, north of Mount Jefferson. I provided the coordinates of our campsite, which we found to be ideal for our 2 dogs, who need seclusion as they may be noisy when they're scared and are intimidating to other dog owners. It was basically a horseshoe-shaped area along a USFS road with level terrain, lots of trees, and a fire pit. It wasn't an official campsite. My daughter wanted to spend the first night alone in a 2-man tent adjacent to ours. My wife and I had our tent about 2 feet away from it. We let Gus, the German shepherd, sleep in her tent with us. Neither my wife nor I were able to get any sleep the first night. The footfall were heavy, not the usual scuttling around in the woodland kind that any of us had heard before. I was paranoid after hearing about a California father who was shot and died in a tent beside his 2 young daughters just before I left, so I was well armed. It goes without saying that I was carrying my rifle, 2 handguns, and my wife. Dogs are excellent detectors, so I thought my daughter could sleep alone since Gus is totally fearless and would fight to the death against anything that tried to touch her. All in all, I had just negative energy and heard heavy footfall that night, which I finally identified as either deer or possibly some elk. Second day. We stroll along the road, around 300 feet from the place circled in the picture. I notice a deserted stretch of road with overgrown grass covering a rusting gate post. My attention was drawn to something blue, and Gus started sprinting down this road right away. My heart starts pounding because I believe he's going to shoot himself or kill some innocent people because it looks like another family is camping with us. I run after him as quickly as I can, and the others join me. I call his name and he stops after 20 feet down the road, but I've traveled far enough to realize that no one is there and that something is wrong with this location. "Hello, is anyone here? Sorry about the dog." I yelled, but nobody answered. I can't resist checking out the site since my curiosity gets the better of me. As I approach, I see there's a problem. Everything you needed for a campground was there, including a tent, blankets, cooler, gas stove, and folding table, but everything had been crushed, ripped, and even torn with what looked like claw marks. Curious as to why somebody would abandon their camping gear, including a pricey REI tent, we all circled around. I reasoned that since someone had hurried off, the animals had taken care of the remainder. There is no other rational explanation. Still, something was flattening a gas tank and cooler, and it was definitely not a snowstorm with trees covering that area. In the late afternoon, as my wife and I are playing bocce ball at the campsite, she walks about 70 feet to the north to use the restroom. Gus suddenly makes a crazy sprint in her direction, even though I am not in direct line of sight. Unless he was called over, which he wasn't, he would normally always be with me. I was impressed by his speed and concentration. My wife is rushing toward me as I run over there because I sense something strange is happening. I pull out my pistol right away. Before I shout to him, Gus has raced another 100 feet into the forest and stops. Leah, my other dog, who never passes up the chance to join the pack leader, is not buying into this. She's been with me for 7 years, and this was the first time in her life that she would not get near my daughter. She had a lot of hair up and was hip attached to us. Once more, Leah always leads the way when we play or hike, taking charge of everything in her route and stopping occasionally to check our location. My wife was asked what had transpired. We searched for 10 minutes without finding any evidence of anything. We saw no trails, no broken branches, and nothing that could indicate what or where something went. She said, "I was trying to pee, and all of a sudden, I felt all the hairs raised, and I knew someone was watching." Since it's too late to pack and drive, we decided to stay an extra night. This time, though, we'll all be staying in the large tent together. I encircle our campground with a rope and improvised coin alarm before we head to bed. I zip-tied a mint can, some coins, and keys from our truck to make it ring whenever something struck the rope. It was quite simple, but it made my wife feel comfortable. A third mysterious object reveals itself when I go to tie off my final corner at a tree next to our tent. With a rope that was so old and brown, it appears like someone else has done precisely what I have done, and for some reason, I missed it at first. It was shattered and only had a few parts left, but sure enough, it was tied about 8 or 10 inches from the ground, just like mine, and it even had a few of rusted washers on it. The state of the rope gave me the impression right away that someone had been here previously, perhaps 10 or 15 years earlier, and had installed the exact same improvised warning system on the same tree. I had to make sure the girls felt protected. Maybe this was the height of my paranoia. All I could think of at the time was that when nightfall arrived, I ordered them sit in the truck and sent a signal to whatever was out there that we are armed by shooting a clip from my .45 into the ground. I told the girls that anyone who is listening to that already knows that we are armed and that we have 2 wolves. We can sleep soundly tonight since we are far too dangerous of a target. We never heard any footsteps that night, and the dogs never became agitated or barked. The next morning, we departed early. Let's go back to the present day. I saw the documentary Missing for 11, Hunted on Amazon. I saw the cluster just next to the campsite we used that weekend, and when I think back to that mystery abandoned campsite with the torn-up tent, broken cooler, and broken stove top, a wave of dread washes over me. Since then, we've gone camping and delighted in the splendor of the Northwest, but within a mere 300 feet of our campsite, there was unquestionably something that might have taken or injured someone. We are all grateful that Gus was present to perform his duties so expertly that afternoon.